They didn't just push me out of my own company, they erased me like I'd never mattered. But they forgot one thing: I built the market they're standing on, and I know exactly how to make it collapse. My name is Elias Grant, founder of MarketForge, the fastest growing analytics platform in the city. For 5 years, it was everything to me: the late nights, the coding marathons, the investor pitch battles. But none of it would have been possible without her. Vera Quinn, my co-founder, my closest friend, and, ironically, the person who taught me what betrayal really feels like. When we met, we were two nobodies working in a cramped co-working space where the AC rattled louder than the keyboards. I was the builder, she was the strategist. I handled servers and systems, she handled investors and storytelling. Together, we were unstoppable. People joked that MarketForge was powered by my brain and her mouth. I trusted her with everything: equity, decision-making, even the passwords to our early prototype. I used to think she trusted me the same way. We weren't siblings, but we fought like them. We weren't partners romantically, but sometimes we cared like them. We weren't married, but we were tied together by the company more tightly than any vows. That was before the board meeting, before the papers slid across the table, before the phrase "we think it's time for new leadership" dropped from her lips like a guillotine blade. She couldn't even look at me when she said it. The others watched with carefully blank expressions, like the decision had been rehearsed. Like they'd all agreed days before. Maybe weeks. Officially, it was performance misalignment. Unofficially, it was a staged overthrow. MarketForge was no longer ours. It was hers. The patents, the clients, the infrastructure, all things I had built with my own 2 hands, were now locked behind doors I no longer had the key to. But people underestimate builders. When you create the machine, you understand how every gear turns, and what happens when one gear quietly stops working. I left the office that day with nothing except my backpack and a silence heavy enough to bruise. She hugged me on the way out, fake, stiff, corporate. The kind of hug that comes with a knife. "Take a break, Eli," she whispered. "You'll land on your feet." I nodded. But as I walked out of the building, something gnawed at me. A detail. A memory. A glitch in her story from the week before. Something wasn't adding up. And for the first time since the betrayal, suspicion sparked, small, sharp, and very, very alive. I should have noticed the first red flag the moment MarketForge landed its biggest contract, the deal with Bronson Retail, the one that doubled our valuation overnight. Vera insisted on handling the negotiations alone, saying they respond better to one voice. At the time, I chalked it up to investor preference. She had always been the one who could make numbers sound like destiny. But after I was pushed out, I kept replaying the weeks leading up to it. Small things. Odd things. Things I ignored because I trusted her more than I trusted my own instincts. Like the Friday she cancelled our usual product roadmap meeting. "It's not important," she said, already grabbing her coat. "Take the day off, Eli. Seriously. Go home." Vera never told me to go home. She used to joke that if I slept at the office, she'd invoice me rent. But that day, she practically shoved me out the door. When I returned the next morning, the whiteboard was wiped clean. All the sketches, all the data flow diagrams, all the revenue model notes, gone. Replaced by a neatly written list of strategic pivots I hadn't approved. Nothing drastic, but enough to unsettle me. Then there was the phone call. Late. Almost midnight. I'd walked into the office after a long debugging session, and through the glass walls of the conference room, I saw her talking to someone, whispering. The tone was sharp, anxious. Not like her. When she saw me, she ended the call instantly. "Everything okay?" I asked. She smiled too fast. "Yeah. Just logistics stuff." Logistics. For a company that sold software. The next week, I got an email from accounting asking about a $40,000 transfer I'd never authorized. When I asked Vera about it, she shrugged. It was a necessary expense. "I'll explain later." But later never came. I tried to brush it all off. Startups were messy. Money moved fast. Calls happened at weird hours. Maybe she was stressed, maybe she was overwhelmed, Maybe she was making executive decisions she didn't have time to walk me through. Besides, she had been there from the beginning. She knew what MarketForge meant to me. She wouldn't jeopardize that, right? Still, I felt the shift, like a cold draft creeping under a locked door. We weren't brainstorming together as much. She started bringing in new advisors without looping me in. She'd disappear for meetings that could have been emails. She stopped asking for my opinion and started telling me her decisions after they were already set in stone. The emotional strain hit harder than I expected. I'd built the company with her, not for her. But it was starting to feel like I was the one being accommodated, tolerated, phased out. I ignored it because I didn't want to believe what the signs were whispering. But red flags don't vanish. They stack. They sharpen. And eventually, they point exactly where you don't want to look. You said. The truth hit me not in a confrontation, but in a document, one I wasn't supposed to see. 3 days after the board forced me out, I went to collect the last of my things from my office. Security escorted me like I was a stranger, a liability. They hovered as I packed my books, my worn-out hoodie, the little resin model of our first server cluster. I was about to leave when my old computer, still logged into my email, dinged. One unread message. From Bronson Retail's procurement manager. Subject: final confirmation before integration. Integration. We weren't integrating anything yet. Our system wasn't scheduled for rollout for another 6 months. Confused, I clicked. Inside was the contract. Except, it wasn't the contract I remembered. My name was missing from the technical lead section. My architectural designs were listed as consultant input. And in the signature block, the intellectual property, my code, was attributed entirely to MarketForge under Vera Quinn's sole authorization. My hands went cold. Attached was a second document. An amendment. A quiet, hidden clause giving Bronson Retail exclusive market rights to a core feature I invented. Rights that could only be granted if I was removed as a decision-maker. And the date on the amendment? 1 week before the board meeting. The same week she told me to take the day off. The same week she erased the whiteboard. I scrolled further. A message chain between Vera and Bronson's executive team. Her words felt like punches. Elias won't agree to exclusivity. We need him out before signing. Leave that part to me. He's too focused on engineering to see what's happening. Once he's gone, we can proceed with finalizing the buyout structure. Buyout. She wasn't just replacing me. She was selling the company out from under me. I couldn't breathe. My ears rang. My vision tilted like the room was sliding sideways. This wasn't partnership. This wasn't tough business. This was a calculated ambush, planned, coordinated, signed. She had gutted my position, stolen my authority, and traded away the innovations I'd poured my life into, all to secure a deal that benefited her alone. I sank into my chair, fingers trembling against the keyboard. I wanted to scream. I wanted to break something. I wanted to march into her office and demand why she'd done it, why she'd smiled at me like a friend while sharpening the blade behind her back. But another feeling rose above the chaos. Cold. Steady. Deadly calm. If Vera thought pushing me out meant silencing me, she'd forgotten something crucial. I built MarketForge's engine. I built it so deeply, so completely, that no one, not even her, could predict what happened when certain components failed. They pushed me out of the company. But what they didn't realize yet was this. I was about to push them out of the market. For a full day after discovering the documents, I did nothing but sit in my tiny apartment. Half unpacked boxes, cold takeout on the counter, blinds closed against the morning sun. The betrayal clung to me like smoke. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her signature on that amendment. I heard her voice, calm, confident, promising Bronson Retail that she would take care of me. It didn't feel real. It felt like a bad dream you keep trying to wake up from. I replayed every conversation we'd had during the last year. Every meeting. Every sudden pivot. Every moment of trust I'd handed her on a silver platter. And with each memory, the pain sharpened. It wasn't just business. It was personal. It was intimate, the kind of betrayal that only comes from someone who knows exactly where your guard is lowest. My chest tightened until I couldn't breathe. I grabbed my jacket, stepped outside, and walked. No direction. No plan. Just walking. Eventually, I ended up at the old co-working space where MarketForge was born. The place with the rattling AC and mismatched chairs. The ugly carpet that smelled faintly of burnt coffee. The spot where Vera and I once scribbled big dreams on napkins because we couldn't afford whiteboards yet. It was quiet now, mostly empty, the startup boom having moved elsewhere. But the moment I stepped inside, something shifted. This was where I built everything from nothing. Before investors. Before advisors. Before Vera's polished boardroom voice drowned out my own. I found the small meeting room where I'd written the first line of code for MarketForge. The table was scratched. The power outlet still sparked if you wiggled the cord wrong. I sat down, letting my fingers run across the wood, and something inside me clicked, loud, sharp, undeniable. MarketForge wasn't hers. It wasn't the board's. It wasn't even the market's. It was mine. Every kernel-level optimization. Every algorithmic model. Every line of back-end logic that made the platform irreplaceable. I built it. I understood it. I was it. And suddenly, the heartbreak, the rage, the disbelief, all folded into a single, fierce realization. They might have taken the company from me, but they had no idea how deeply MarketForge depended on the systems only I knew how to maintain. They had no idea how fragile their shiny new empire actually was. They had stolen from me. But they had also underestimated me. I leaned back in the chair, feeling the shift inside me. Not anger. Resolve. Not vengeance. Clarity. If they wanted a market war, fine. I knew exactly where the structural weaknesses were buried. I knew the fault lines beneath the features they just sold to Bronson Retail. And I knew how to build something better, faster, before they even saw it coming. For the first time since the betrayal, I felt steady. They pushed me out. Now it was my turn to push back. I didn't want theater. I wanted proof, and leverage. Revenge, I told myself, had to be surgical. No screaming headlines that would make me look petty, no reckless hacks that would land me in jail. This was about stripping the mask off a calculated theft and watching the whole house of cards wobble. I dug through my offline backups, the nightly tarballs I'd kept when I anticipated investor audits and regulatory nightmares. There were drafts of contracts, raw API specs with my initials, commit logs that proved I authored the core feature Bronson now claimed. I cross-referenced timestamps with the amendment and Vera's message chain. The pattern was undeniable. There were people who had been sidelined when Vera swept in, an ex-DevOps lead who'd been demoted, a junior product manager who'd been ignored after flagging the Bronson exclusivity risk, a former sales rep who'd watched the buyout negotiations happen behind closed doors. All of them resented the way decisions were railroaded. I met them one by one, in coffee shops, through encrypted messages. I didn't ask for loyalty. I asked for corroboration. They gave me names, meeting times, copies of calendar invites Vera had forgotten to share. MarketForge's brilliance was also its vulnerability. There were undocumented dependencies, timing sequences and cache priming routines I'd written to shave milliseconds off processing. Without them, integration would fail quietly, throughput would drop, error rates would spike, and Bronson's retail pipelines would choke. I drew diagrams, annotated fail points, and ranked them by how quickly they'd expose the exclusivity clause as worthless. I couldn't touch their servers, but I could supply information in ways that would force a response. I prepared a white paper, technical, dry, heavy with data, that outlined a compatibility risk inherent in Bronson's exclusivity. I seeded it to a trusted industry journalist under pseudonym and sent a sanitized version to several Bronson engineers posing as an independent auditor. The goal wasn't immediate collapse. It was to make them look closer, to spark internal audits, and to force Vera to reveal more of what she'd done. I compiled a dossier, emails, amendment scans, the Bronson threads, witness statements. I organized the materials so any lawyer, any journalist, any regulator could follow the chain from Vera's pivot to the buyout. I encrypted the file and distributed keys selectively, so if anything happened to me, the dossier would still see the light of day. All the while, Vera played the confident victor. Her name was on op-eds. She smiled at press events. There were celebratory dinners and glossy videos of new strategic partnerships. From the outside, she owned the story. But power looks different when it's brittle. Each move I made was quiet, precise, like loosening bolts under statue. The city still applauded her, but under that applause, tiny cracks were beginning to form. The next step was the riskiest. Bait that would force Vera's hand and bring Bronson into the open. I knew what would make her panic, and how she would respond when she did. You said. The spark that ignited the explosion came from Bronson Retail's own legal department. Exactly as planned. 3 weeks after I quietly distributed my compatibility risk white paper, Bronson's systems buckled. Not enough to crash, just enough to terrify. Their nightly inventory sync stalled. Error logs flooded dashboards. Store managers woke up to mismatched data and broken forecasting tools. The exclusivity feature, the very thing Vera sold them, failed at scale without the undocumented routines only I knew. Bronson's engineers scrambled. They dug. They audited the integration code line by line, then the contract. That's when they found the hidden amendment. The exclusivity clause Vera had stuffed into the margins like contraband. And the signatures. Out of sequence. Time-stamped differently. Legally questionable. Bronson panicked. Exactly the reaction I was counting on. On a grey Monday morning, they called an emergency press conference. I didn't attend, but I watched from a cafe across the street as cameras flashed and executives shifted nervously behind a podium. MarketForge knowingly withheld key dependencies, their spokesperson announced. And additionally, we have discovered concerns about contract authorization, specifically, signatures obtained without full board consent. It was the first crack. The second came an hour later. MarketForge released a counter-statement, written by Vera, denying everything. But her confidence was already crumbling. She looked pale in the televised interview, her voice tight, her normally polished veneer flickering. Then the third crack. My dossier dropped. Every journalist who had received an encrypted key opened it at the same time. Social feeds exploded. Screens filled with screenshots of messages, thread timestamps, the amendment itself, the internal emails where Vera promised to remove obstacles, meaning me, to close the Bronson deal. The narrative shifted instantly. This wasn't a simple contract dispute. It was founder sabotage, corporate betrayal, market manipulation for personal gain. Reporters swarmed the MarketForge building. Cameras turned toward the glass doors as security escorted Vera out. This time she was the liability. I stepped out of the cafe and crossed the street, not to confront her, but to watch her face as she realized the truth. She saw me. Our eyes met through the chaos. Her lips trembled. Eli, what did you do? I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. Bronson filed suit within hours. Investors withdrew funding by sunset. Partners froze contracts. MarketForge's valuation plummeted so fast analysts called it the fastest self-inflicted implosion in the sector's history. By nightfall, the company she'd stolen from me was in free fall, unrecoverable, unsalvageable, choking on the very deal she betrayed me to secure. And Vera. Her empire was collapsing around her. Her reputation disintegrating live on broadcast. Her board turning against her with the same cold efficiency she once used against me. They pushed me out. Now I had pushed them, her, out of the market entirely. In the weeks after the implosion, the city buzzed with the fallout. MarketForge, once the golden child of the analytics world, became a cautionary tale whispered in investor lounges and startup panels. A company built on deception can't stand, they'd say. Look what happened to MarketForge. Vera vanished from the spotlight almost overnight. One moment she was the face of innovation, signing autographs at conferences. The next, she was the subject of investigative documentaries, her name trending alongside phrases like fraud, misconduct, and founder sabotage. Bronson Retail pursued their lawsuit aggressively. Their lawyers picked apart every line of the contract she'd tampered with. The board she'd once charmed turned on her with startling speed. They claimed ignorance, pinned the blame entirely on her, and expelled her from the company she'd stolen. She tried reaching out to me once, late at night, a cracked whisper through the phone. Eli, please. I can fix this. Just help me explain. But there was nothing to explain. She built her throne from my work, my trust, my sweat. And it collapsed exactly the way anything built on a lie eventually does. I didn't answer. Because by then, I was already building something new. Not revenge. Not a rebound company. Something cleaner. Something honest. A small team of the people who had believed in me from the start, those she pushed aside, joined me in a compact, sunlit workspace overlooking the river. No fancy boardrooms. No smoke and mirror promises. Just builders, creators, and people who remembered what integrity looked like. Investors, real ones, the kind who valued transparency, reached out quietly. They'd seen the truth unfold publicly. They knew what I was capable of. They didn't want Market Forge 2.0. They wanted something better. And so I got to work. Not driven by spite, but by clarity. Not to destroy, but to create. And still, there was one piece of poetic justice that settled in my mind like the final note of a song. Market Forge didn't die because I attacked it. It died because the one who stole it from me never understood how to run what she took. The market didn't reject me. It rejected her. One morning, months later, I stood on a rooftop watching the sun rise over the skyline. The same skyline Market Forge once dominated. The world felt quieter. Lighter. Mine again. And that's when the goosebump truth hit me. They pushed me out to take everything I built. But in the end, they lost everything because they couldn't build anything without me. To everyone watching, have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted? Someone who thought pushing you down would keep you silent? Tell me your story in the comments. I read every one. And if you're new here, hit subscribe. Because this isn't the last story of justice you're going to hear.